time for most of you. Apparently it is. Wonderful. Well, thank you. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. Virtual audience, thank you for joining us. And I'd like to thank Rhys Bowen and Clare Broyles for not only bringing delicious treats, but bringing us a new Molly Murphy book.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yay. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
When-
I think it's
when
book
was Molly
21,
Murphy's-
isn't it?
When
Book
was Molly?
21.
Okay, it's book what?
Book 21, I believe.
Okay, but when was the first Molly published?
2001.
So it's really been a long time.
It has, yeah. She's
I remember
survived
we've been
quite-
here together the entire
Yeah,
time, but
yeah,
I
we have, yes. Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
first Molly Murphy sort of won all kinds of awards, and it was really a wonderful introduction to the immigrant experience, which is now, perhaps more fraught than it was back then.
Well, yeah. Actually, it was a really good send-off for that book because, I got this idea when I went to Ellis Island that I wanted to write something that was centered on Ellis Island and the immigrants. So I had this mystery. It was Murphy's Law. I had this mystery that was centered on Ellis Island. And then finally, Molly steps ashore in Manhattan. And I thought, what on earth do I know about Manhattan in 1901? And I realized I knew nothing. And I thought, I'm destined to research on every page for the rest of my life. And that's what really it's turned out to be, hasn't it?
It has, yes. In fact, for a scene in this book that takes a few pages, I did 20 hours of research. When they walk inside a movie theater in 1909,
Yeah.
08.
08.
1908.
Yeah,
1908. We've
1908,
just
yeah.
written the 1909 one.
Yeah.
1908. They walk inside and you think, what does it look like? What is it called? Not a movie theater. Wasn't called a movie. Who's running the projection? Every single part of that had to be researched, and I had to go down to reading a trade publication from the time written for projectionists on, how to run the movies, what movies were out there, and to get all of the terminology correct and to know what would it be like when they walked into that
Were they actually
storefront.
using celluloid or the film that is, so volatile it catches fire easily and it's hard to preserve it?
That is a plot point.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
I did read the book. Of course I did. I always read the books. If you sign a book here, I have read your book, unless, of course, it's Patrick, in which case Patrick has read the book, or John,
Yeah.
or occasionally Pat King. But we never do events without having actually read the book because it's hard to fake it. And besides, we wouldn't have you here if we didn't enjoy your books, right?
No.
That would be a
Yeah.
mistake. Right. So you have moved us through some really interesting times at the turn of the 20th century. Molly, in theory, is retired, but amazingly, even though she's no longer professional, she seems to keep sleuthing. So,
Well, what we've wanted to show is how difficult it is if you're a mother. She has young children now. If you're a mother, how do you handle a profession as well? And obviously, if you're a detective, it's a very dangerous profession. You don't want to put yourself in harm's way when you've got little kids. So each of the books leading up to this has had something in it which draws Molly in because either her family's personally involved or Daniel's something in it that makes it compelling that she has to help. Because she's just not, she's not at the stage where she can say, oh, I'll just go out and solve this case and leave the kids at home for 3 weeks. She can't do that. So, we wanted to show, I think, what it's like to have little kids and work and what it's like to have a teenager and work, because we've both been through that, we know all about that.
it's even more dangerous because Daniel actually does have a dangerous job.
Yeah.
So if both he and she were wiped out, those kids would really be in terrible. His mother-in-law might gain custody of the children. That would be a terrible thing.
Yeah. Well, at least they grow.
Mother-in-law, not his. His
Yeah,
mother,
yeah.
her mother.
At least they grow up polite then, wouldn't they?
And actually, she's been, what is she up to?
Well, we haven't seen her for a couple of books.
No,
we'll have to
we
bring her
haven't.
back next time, won't we? We haven't seen her for a couple of books because we've been focused very much on New York City, and we've kept her away for a bit, which has been a good idea. In the next book, we have someone who comes in who's even worse than the mother-in-law, don't we?
But we were kind to Molly in the next book, the one that we've just turned in. We have lots of people coming into New York for a celebration, and we we decided that she would prefer to stay with someone else. So she stayed at someone else's house that's more wealthy than them for the celebration.
Yeah.
What a really good idea. So this book, you're running up to Easter, right? Isn't this like Easter week in
Yes,
New York?
it is.
And
Yeah.
you know, I can't. I mean, maybe it's too early for that, but anybody my age remembers, you know, the Easter parade and the Irving Berlin song, and everybody, you know, showed up with fabulous hats and the whole thing. Was that really true at the time that you're writing?
Go ahead, Claire.
It absolutely was. In fact, I read the New York Times for every day leading up to and after the Easter parade. They're brilliant. They give pages and pages of description. I mean, if we had wanted the book to be longer, I could have given you 10 pages on what the Easter parade was like on that Easter Sunday. But we did put in, there was fruit on the hats. There was definitely, yes, fruit was very in on the hats, and there was starting to be a smattering of, there was automobiles mixed with carriages, mixed with people walking, and it was just on the cusp of being something everyone did rather than just the 400 and the wealthiest, which the 400 did not like.
Yeah. No, they came out of, you know, the two cathedrals, St. John and St. Patrick's, are right there. So they came out of church or out of mass, and then they walked up Fifth Avenue. So and when everybody else came to see them.
Right. No, I mean, it was a real sort of like the Met Gala, right?
Yeah.
Except that the costumes were not quite so outlandish. You know, they now have a dress code, as I understand it, from the Met Gala. Any of you familiar with Lauren Sanchez, or have you seen any photos of her, Jeff Bezos's quote fiance, who was plastic, to put it mildly? And as I understand it, when they were invited to attend the Met Gala, I think it was last year, not this year, Anna Wintour, who runs it, refused to let them come unless she got to approve what Lauren wore, because Lauren hardly wore anything. Maybe they got burned by Kim Kardashian, because here's another fun fact, and then I'll go back to your book for a minute. But when Fiona Davis was here with her book, The Stolen Queen, she reminded me that Kim Kardashian went to the Met Gala in some like gold lame sequin, you know, I mean, this incredible gold dress, and she stood next to one of the Met's gold sarcophagus, and all for all the photo stuff, which alerted the authorities in Egypt that the Met had a stolen sarcophagus, and they had to give it back. So I can see there would be many reasons for having, perhaps some control over the dress code. But I'm assuming in what you're talking about that, it was like decorum and good taste that dictated what people were wearing.
Exactly. And I think just like the Met Gala, it set the fashion for the year. What's on the hats? What kind of hats and gowns are people wearing at the Easter parade?
But of course, our Easter parade is tinged with tremendous sadness, because right around the same time, there's going to be a huge funeral for a New York police officer who has been killed in the line of duty over in Italy. They're investigating the new Black Hand gang, which is going to be the mafia later. And it was such a shocking thing that the whole of New York turned out for it, didn't they?
Yes, the streets were lined. And as I was researching for that, reading about Easter Day, it kept mentioning the Petrosino funeral. And it didn't say who Petrosino was. I had to go back weeks and weeks. That's how much everybody knew. When you wrote a news story about it, you didn't have to say who Petrosino was or what had happened. Every person in the city knew. And then the streets were just lined with everyone showing their respects for, I believe he was the first Italian-American lieutenant in the police, because, there was definitely tension, Irish and Italian tension, and he was a very brave Italian lieutenant who had taken on the Black Hand and been murdered.
Yeah. And of course, this is what Daniel has been doing, so it very much is brought home to Molly that this is a consequence that could happen if you're in that sort of police work. And I have to say, about research, Clare is the research queen. She reads the New York Times for every day that we write about. And sometimes she will say to me, "Oh no, Molly has to take an umbrella because it's going to rain later that afternoon." And I go, it's fiction.
It really is true. It's really hard for me to write differently than if I know what it was like on that day. I can't do it.
Currently, then you're a good pair, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, Rhys, are you planning to stay on board doing this? I know that the object eventually is for Clare to write them herself.
Well, yeah, I mean, that would be, I've been stepping back with each book. You know, when Claire first came on board 4 books ago now, and she said, I'd like to write the Molly series with you. I expect you know I'd put that series on hold because I couldn't do 3 books a year. It was just too much. And I said to Claire, well, we'll give it a try. And I wasn't quite sure it would work, but she came on board having reread all the books, having got Molly's voice perfectly, and with loads of good ideas. So, you know, those first books were very much a collaboration on every page. But now Claire has done so much research and knows so much, she'll say, oh, well, I'll take the scene that takes place here, and then she'll go ahead with that. And then I'll take up a bit. If we're walking through New York, she always hands over to me because, you know, when I started the Molly Murphy books, I didn't know that much about New York in the early 20th century. So I went and I walked every place that Molly walked. And I had people write to me and say, in this book, you had Molly walk from A to B. That's absolutely stupid. And I'd write back, I did it. So I really, and so now I know that New York of Molly's very, very well because I've done it for 20 books. In fact, I said to the publicist at Minotaur, I said, I know this area so well now, I could give walking tours. And she went, oh, walking tours. I went, no, not really.
New York was much smaller then, although, I mean, it had been growing at a rapid rate, but it wasn't as big a city, you know, back then. So you were still further down south on the island than.
Yeah.
How far up did the city go there?
It went, well, when you get as far as Central Park, there's a big apartment block that was built not that long before called the Dakota Building, because it's called that because it was so far out north that it was in Dakota. So, you know, gradually it's creeping up Central Park. And we've got just about as far as the very tips of Harlem. But if you go further north than that, you've got farms still. You've got little market gardens and things and little shacks. And, you know, that whole of Washington Heights area is farms.
And this book, we go out to Edison's studio in the Bronx. And that was out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
That was
but if I
farm
remember
country.
right, wasn't a lot of the early movie industry in New Jersey? Weren't the
Yeah.
filming it was across the river because there was less.
Yeah, Edison started across the river, and the time we're writing about, he's just moved to a brand new thing in the Bronx.
Right.
And he's built this new building, which is floor to ceiling, like a huge greenhouse, huge floor to ceiling glass. So you get all the natural light. And he's putting in a swimming pool on the roof of the adjacent building. I mean, it's a huge undertaking.
Yes, and he was so controlling and so difficult, and then the weather was not always ideal. That eventually, a lot of the movies decamped to Hollywood, to California.
Well, he was
Better
always
weather
suing.
and not
Yeah.
Thomas Edison.
He sued for patents the whole time. I mean, anybody who tried to do anything against him, he shut them down. He was a bully. He really was.
He was, for a great inventor, he was a truly terrible person.
Yeah.
And you know who else was Henry Ford. Henry Ford was a dreadful
Yeah.
man.
Well, we did try to kill him. We couldn't do it, but we tried.
I mean, I think that'd be a step too far, even if it is fiction, Rhys.
Yeah.
Well, yes, and I thought that this part of this book was going to take place in New Jersey when I started researching, because Edison, New Jersey, and then looking into studios, and I wanted a rival studio, and there's one called Mutascope that turns into Biograph, and it's right there, walking distance from Molly.
Yeah,
on
14th Street and 5th Avenue. Yeah, right there.
And then at first, we thought Edison's would be in New Jersey, and I had to dig way down deep and find out he had just opened the other one in the Bronx.
Yeah.
So really, every little detail like that, I always make sure that it's.
And then how do you
what
get
it
out
was.
to it? I mean, there were a couple of L lines that went out in that direction, but there was still a good deal of walking once you got there.
Yes.
How'd you get to New Jersey? Was the Holland Tunnel there, or
No, there was no.
so? What
Oh.
was it? A bridge?
There must a bridge, yes. It must have
Must have
gone over the
been.
bridge, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because it goes right up in the north of the island, and it goes over. What's the bridge called?
It used to be the Tappan Zee, didn't it?
No, that's way up there.
Way
no,
up.
it's called. It's not called the Washington Bridge. No, that's the other side. There is a bridge at the north where it's not very wide, and it goes across, and that's where the trains went across. Yeah, no tunnel.
I don't think so. I hate the tunnel. I always flinch when you
Yeah.
have to take a
Yeah.
car over to Newark and you have to
Yeah,
go through
yeah.
the tunnel.
Yeah.
I keep feeling the weight of water and the heat. It just wouldn't
Yeah,
take that much.
yeah,
But
yeah.
right, always glad to get to the other side.
Yeah.
So tell us the story. Now we've talked about all the background stuff,
Yeah.
but what happens?
Well, this starts, the main story starts with Molly's friend Ryan O'Hare, who's a flamboyant actor and playwright, coming to say, I have a surprise for you, come. And he takes them to what turns out to be a movie theater, and the flickering images come up on the screen, and there he is acting. And he says, I've started acting in movies. And this is interesting because until now, movies were just trying to see what a moving camera could do. There's a very famous one of a wave where the wave breaks on the shore and everybody in the movie theater ran back in case they got wet. So we're now seeing that, oh yes, we could write little plots for these, and we could have, they're about 15 minutes long at the moment, but then they could be serialized. And so we're grabbing an audience now because we're telling a story. So Ryan, as an actor, sees the future of this. And he takes Molly and Bridie along to watch while they're filming. And the leading lady is being very difficult and won't learn her lines, even though there's no... you speak the lines, but nobody can hear them. They come along the bottom of the screen like, how dare you? How dare you? And so...
Back to that, if you're watching television anymore, especially the British things, we're right back to caption.
You need them for British things. You need them, don't you? Like who can understand
Scottish
Vera?
is even worse. I know. If you're watching Shetland, good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah. No, so anyway, she takes Bridie, and the director has a hissy fit when this woman can't remember what she's supposed to do, and he says, "You're fired." And he points. He says, "Well, this young girl will do just as well." And it turns out that Bridie is by now very beautiful, and so he says, "Well, you can have the part." And Molly really doesn't want this. She doesn't want her daughter involved in this. And also she has, by now, a fairly new baby. And how do you can't spend the whole day watching Bridie when you've got a baby at home. You can't bring a baby to the studio. But Sid and Gus, the neighbors, those of you who know Sid and Gus, her next door neighbors, they say, don't worry, we'll chaperone Bridie. Well, their chaperoning is not what Molly would always call chaperoning. But anyway, so they try it. And one thing we learned about these early movies is that all the stunts were real. They didn't have stunt doubles. They didn't do things. They if you saw the Keystone Cops holding onto the back of a speeding van, they really were. And swinging out around the corners, people died. And also, they tried to do scenes with real trains on real train tracks. As you notice on the cover of this is a train. You might wonder why it's there. Because there's a scene with a train in which there's a real train on a train track and things go rather nastily wrong. Yeah.
And we've put Bridie right in the middle of Biograph Studio with D.W. Griffiths as the director. Found out that he's the one who came up with lights, camera, action. The lights to make sure that the lights were on it, and then the camera because they literally were rolling the camera. Someone had to start turning it.
Yeah.
And action because it's easier to yell than go. People can hear it a little bit better.
Yeah, so the interesting thing with this is we've got a whole lot of real characters. We've got D.W. Griffith, we've got Mary Pickford, we've got some who are slightly fictionalized because we do things with them, but they're based on real people. The two Martin brothers who founded Biograph, who was the big rival of Edison, they're in it. And also the secretary, who was a famous French woman called Alice Guy. We've got her in as Alice Mann, and she's always in the credits as a secretary. She came up with most of the innovations that we actually see, but she's still the secretary,
Women's History Month. It's time to give women bigger look in
Well,
than they
all
generally
of,
get.
all of our books now have this undergoing, this feminist underlining things, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah. We want to make sure that people know that all the time. One of the things she invented, which we loved, was called the fade in and the fade out. What she did was she put a cigar box over the camera lens, and she gradually opened it, and then she gradually closed it. That was the fade in and the fade out. It worked very well.
When I was a kid, when we would go down in Chicago to the Science and Industry Museum, they had an old-fashioned Main Street. And in there, they had a little Nickelodeon,
Yeah.
and you could go in and sit down, and they would play these very, very early, jerky, with captions
Yeah.
and the whole bit. And they
Yeah.
were really. I mean, if you look at the early Charlie Chaplin things, I mean, it's not like. I mean, they move almost like marionettes, don't they?
Well, it's because the speed is
exactly.
different from modern
Yeah,
things. That's why.
but I remember, how fun it
Yeah.
was to go watch
Yeah.
them and recognize that. In fact, even if you watch television shows from, 15 years ago or something, you can, the progress has been
Yeah.
extraordinary. I mean, now we have drones and we have, all these things that enhance the experience.
Remember when we were young and they had those Lost in Space and things, or the early Doctor Who's, you had a cardboard Dalek coming towards you, going and that was very scary in those days.
Well, they're doing wonderful things with restoration now where they're going back and actually playing these movies at the correct speed for the time, and they don't look old-fashioned.
Yeah.
They look really modern, and especially some of the things Alice Guy was doing in the French studios. If you think of posing the little fairies, that was sort of that French style. That was Alice Guy coming up with a lot of innovation. So we really wanted to have an Alice doing the same thing in the New York studio with us.
Yeah.
Okay, so Bridie is in New Jersey, and
No,
No.
not New Jersey. No, she's actually
in the Bronx.
Biograph, which is very
Oh,
close
sorry.
to 14th Street, so very
Okay.
close to Molly. Yeah, so Bridie is acting there, and there seem to be too many accidents on the set. Things start going wrong. A lamp falls over and might have fallen into the pool, and all these little things you could say were accidents, but Molly thinks there are too many of them. So is somebody trying to sabotage this studio? And then is it Edison trying to sabotage this studio? So that's what she's looking into when things take a very nasty turn.
I still want to be in New Jersey. I don't know why. Right. Okay. Well, they're still filming all over New York. I mean, when I have been there, occasionally you run into
Yeah.
a movie location where they blocked off something or other. And
Yeah.
but now the support system for all that is just huge.
Oh, yeah.
Part of it is the catering. If you're really lucky and you're wandering by, you have a chance at the catering as a bystander. I mean, it's unbelievable the perks that they, come up
Yeah.
with for everybody. But you're talking back to like bare bones when it was all just getting started.
Yeah.
One of the fun things that we brought out in the book about filming in the middle of a city where people were not yet aware of the film industry is that they didn't know what was going on. We have a scene in here in which the train driver has no idea that his train is being used to film a scene. So he thinks there really is deadly peril going on. And that comes out of accounts in the New York Times and in other places of people calling the police to report train robbers taking over a train and running across the top because the police, nobody knew that they were going to be filming on top of a moving train, and it was distressing to people. And then they believed they had seen a person thrown off of the moving train, but it was a dummy dressed as a person that they had filmed falling off the train.
Yeah, we have one fun thing fairly near the beginning, which is when they come out of the theatre where they've been watching Ryan acting, some woman, he's the villain, some woman comes up to him outside and sort of says, you swine. She doesn't, she So,
Obviously, you had a lot of fun with this one. So are some books more fun than others to write?
yeah, I think, this was a lot of fun because there was actually, unfortunately, there's too much. I mean, if we'd got everything in we wanted to get in, it would have been like a 500-page book. So you know all these good things and you think, well, how can I get them in? But we wanted to give that good feel of this is the very beginning of the movies as we know them. One interesting thing, the actors got no credits on at the end of the movie because they thought if they put their names on, they'd have to pay them more. And so we have a very young Mary Pickford who has been in vaudeville, and now this is her first movie, and this is actually true. When Claire was doing the research, she thought, she was looking through and like, who do I have? Like, Mary Pickford, first movie, April 19, no, and that, yay! So we got Mary Pickford in there. And so, you know, I think the thing that's fun about this is that it is all real. We're not making stuff up. I mean, we're making up a bad thing and a murder and things, but we're not making up what was happening.
Yes. I mean, we have to, so the Marvin brothers are the famous founders. Well, we changed them to the Martin brothers,
Yes,
like you said
yeah,
earlier, because they may be implicated in the murdering business, and we didn't want to implicate some very innocent movie starters.
Yeah.
That's true. You do have to be careful not to, you know, completely distort the life of real people, right?
And in answer to your question, is some books more fun than others? I think some of the books in this series have been darker. I know when All That Is Hidden was an interesting plot, and it dealt with a house of the very rich people, and but it was quite a dark plot, wasn't it? And that means you're not chuckling and going ahead as much. You're working out intricately how could this have happened in a locked room, etc. So it's a challenge, but it's not as much fun as some of them are.
No, but you don't want every book to be
No,
like
you-
every other
no,
book.
you-
You
no,
know,
you
what would
don't.
be the point for you or for the
Well,
reader too?
I think this is one of the reasons that Molly has survived through 21 books is there's so many experiences in New York City to talk about, you know, the whole immigrant experience, and then we've had the garment sweatshops, we've had the drawing rooms of the 400, we've gone out to Long Island, we've done all sorts of things that are very different from each other. So there's no two books really are the same in any way.
And the great thing about historical fiction, it already happens, so you don't have to age people. You can actually start
Yeah.
a new book
Yeah.
the day after the last case ended.
Well, we've
if
tried
you
to
really
do that,
want to. Right. No, but I mean, that's a question that comes up a lot with contemporary fiction is, you know, people are always saying, you know, how are you aging the character? What happens generally is the dog never gets older, but everybody else, you know, moves on. Or was it Spencer moved through 4 wars in the course of his career, you know, all the way from Korea to
Well,
whatever.
Well, I mean, Miss Marple and Poirot, about 135 by the time they died, weren't they?
Oh, which reminds me, I'm going to give a little plug here. If any of you have seen it, we watched one last night. David Suchet is doing a wonderful program, and he is going to Agatha Christie when she was still married to Archie, so I think it was 1922. And, you know, I think she was better off eventually without Archie, but her divorce she never got over it for a whole lot of reasons. So this is a happy, not divorced Agatha Christie, and they were sent out on a tour of part of the empire for, I don't remember, some exhibition that was coming up or whatever. So the first one, which my husband and I watched last night, is in South Africa, and then they're going to New Zealand and Australia and Canada.
And Hawaii.
Hawaii, that's it. And Canada and Hawaii, so it's moving, you know, in a circle. South Africa must be then Australia, then New Zealand, then Hawaii, and then eventually Canada. But it's really interesting to watch because they have some, you know, old bits of news and photos in it and so forth. But it's the photography is wonderful. And David Suchet, when he's not being Poirot, is completely different. And I've bragged about this many times, but when I went to Agatha Christie's 100th birthday party in Torquay, which this whole thing started on, David Suchet and Jane, what was her name that played Miss Marple?
Oh, Joan Hickson.
Joan Hickson. the railroad company ran a special train, the Orient Express, down to Torquay for this occasion. And David Suchet rode in one car and Joan Hickson rode in another. And we all went down, the British Crime Writers Association, all the other people, we all went down to the little station because it's a very small station in Torquay. And we're all standing on the platform and the train stops and David Suchet gets out. He has this beautiful bouquet. She gets out of the other car. He walks over and he bows over her hand. At last he says, "We meet," because they never did. It was just a magical moment. But more magical was that evening at the dance. David Suchet asked me to dance, and I did. But I'm pretty sure that the reason he asked me to dance was because he's my size.
Yeah, he's quite short.
He is. He's, so, I mean, it was lovely. We had a perfectly wonderful conversation. And that was, I'm trying to remember when he did Poirot for what, like 20 years or something?
I think he
so
said
this
25 years,
right at the, right at the beginning. But he was just a charming man in this TV thing, which I recommend to you highly. He speaks in his own voice. Rather than in Poirot, so it's a completely different. And he doesn't have the mustache.
Well, that's what he said. The moment he puts the mustache on, he's Poirot. When he takes it off, he's himself.
Right.
So,
but they're doing a great job with the scenery. I've actually been to all the places that are in this documentary. Rob and I were talking about, Table Mountain in Cape Town looks the same. So I'm really looking forward to seeing. Photography, and especially using drones, has come such an extraordinary way. It's a completely different experience now to watch things like that. Yeah.
Well, that's not a bad gig for him either, is it? Going around the world
we would volunteer.
We'd
Someone
volunteer.
wanna
We would
send us on a tour. Yes.
Well, I've already seen he did the Orient Express with where Agatha Christie went on the Orient Express. I've seen that one already. That's very interesting too.
So much of her life was all about the disappearance and, her life afterward. It's really nice to see her when she had just written, I think, one Poirot. I think she'd just written the first one. In fact, it's The Man in the Brown Suit that is the one that takes place in South Africa.
That was a really good book. I like
but it's
that one.
just nice to see photos of her looking happy and, the whole thing.
Yeah. And when she gets to Hawaii, she's going to learn to surf, which is going to be interesting. There's a picture of her with a great big surfboard, so who knows? Yeah.
So, how about questions from any of you now that we've talked about the book? Oh, there went a hand. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to commend Claire for all the research, and with that I have two questions. In addition to computer, do you also keep a hard copy of all your research? That's the first question. The second question is, how long or how much effort, how long did it take you to do all the research regarding this book?
So the hard copy, some of it is in books. So we do have some are at my mom's house that we'll go and look at. And so I have some at my house. So there's some in books, but most of them are on a Word document with about 1 million hyperlinks in it. So it's called Outline, and then it says, this is what I think is going to happen. And then it has all these people, and it's like, this person, fictional, this person, real, and then all the stuff about them. And then whenever I find information, I just dump it into that file with a hyperlink. So there's one place I can go back to and say, wait, didn't we find out this? And then, we share the document. We can go back and look at what's real and what's not.
I mean, we bounce everything off each other too, which is really nice. She'll say, I've just found this, and where can we put this in? And I look and go, oh, how about we do this? So,
Yeah. What was the second question?
How long did it take you, or how much time did you spend to prepare before you were really ready to put it all together? Or were you just sort of like pantsing along?
We sort of look as we go along, don't we?
Yeah, so I think before we agreed on the basic plot, there was at least a month of research of, is this possible? Is this the area we want to go to? And that was like what Rhys said about, Mary Pickford. So everything aligned. There was a lot of research of, do we have to go to New Jersey? What would the rival studio be? There's a whole plot in there about the actual father of film who mysteriously disappeared while got onto a train and never got off. And then his son was involved with a lawsuit against Edison and came to New York to pursue that and was killed duck hunting on Fire Island.
Yeah.
So
Very strange.
very strange.
Given that there are no ducks on fire.
So we've fictionalized that family so as to not impugn the real family, but that whole plot comes in there, and so I would say it was at least a month of just finding all those things and seeing where do they all intersect in a way that could be a meaningful plot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Any more? Yes.
What channel is that thing about Agatha Christie?
It's BritBox.
Oh, it's on Brit.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is it called?
It's called. I think it's called In Agatha's Footsteps. Is that right?
I think it's called David Suchet.
David Suchet.
Just go to
follows-
BritBox and
yeah.
start with David Suchet.
It's
and
brand
that'll
new,
get
so if you go onto BritBox, it'll be one of the things that comes up fairly quickly. Yes.
Two questions. First, you mentioned you do some historical fiction things like with Pickford. Do you have to do any releases from those people? Is there any of that, or is it just?
Well, since they're all dead now, it's rather good. But no, no. I mean, when you're dealing with real people, which I do quite a lot in my other Royal Spinus series, if they are public figures, you're fairly okay as long as you don't really. I mean, if I took the Queen of England and made her into a murderer, that wouldn't be all right. But I do use the royal family in my Royal Spinus books, and I try and make them say exactly what I know they have said. So I try and keep, we keep to Mary Pickford as she was at the time, and I think all the characters in this we try and keep to pretty much. The Marvin brothers,
That's why we changed their name, because we were gonna make them more dubious characters than, and so we don't want to impugn real people. So we fictionalized that part, but kept the rest of the world very true to what it was.
I think if Wallace Simpson had heirs, they might very well sue you.
Well, no, except I think I can probably stand my ground and say, well, I've got a letter she wrote in which she said this, Yeah. Yeah.
Second question is, with the research and the plot, did you ever have something where, this is where you wanted to go with a plot, but the historical research said, no, it was a dead end, you couldn't do it? You see what I'm saying?
Well, I think that's when we say, well, it's fiction. Let's go there anyway, don't we? Yeah. I mean, I think that's what happens when people write a memoir sometimes. They're so tied to what really happens that they can't let the story take over and go with itself. So if we feel that we want our story to go somewhere, we're writing fiction, so it goes there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm in an improv troupe here in Scottsdale, and the Outcasters. And it's very improv to say, if this, then what? So you create the world as it actually was, and you look and you say, these are all the things we get to play with. They're already there. If these things are there, then what more could there be? And then that fiction part is all up to us. We can make it go wherever we want to.
That's one of the nice things about writing fiction is that you really are, you create a little world and you can make bad things happen to people if you feel like it.
I think one of the most difficult things is the actual murder, because, someone needs to be murdered in a way that nobody knows who did it immediately, but yet somebody could eventually figure out who did it. And, Molly has to be that person. So for me, well, sometimes we spend days and days talking it out, well, if...
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. In real life, most murders are either very simple and very sordid. You bash someone over the head, or else you don't even know they're a murder. Someone slips some poor old guy 20 Tylenols and he dies. So, you do need a good clean murder that you can that you can get away with. Yeah. 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 Oh. Yes. Yeah.
With all adoring regards to Rhys, is Claire going to, or have you already started your own world?
I have ideas, and I am working on them. Yes, I'm trying to work on them in between the Molly Murphys, teaching full time, being in an improv troupe, and I just directed a children's musical at the school. So, in between all of that, I'm trying to create my own world as well.
and since you saw her last, she's had a short story published in Alfred Hitchcock magazine, so that was pretty good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you ever get to a point in like your murderer changes, or you're like, oh, maybe that doesn't make sense?
I know some writers have done that. They've been writing the book and they suddenly go, wait, that wasn't the murder at all. No, that's not happened to me, I don't think. I think I've always known I'm not an outliner. So Claire's had to learn this, that I'm not gonna outline. I'm gonna say, well, let's go to a party and see what happens there, and but I do know usually who's going to die and why. So I think we know, motives are very important to me. I read too many books in which the motive is so flimsy. If my daughter wasn't a cheerleader, would I stab someone? I know that actually happened once, but I mean, I like to have a plausible motive that someone is pushed into a corner so far that they kill.
It's interesting that you asked that, because with the murderer from this book, I was feeling unsure about the motivations, if they were strong enough. So I actually went and wrote the murderer's story from the murderer's point of view, as if that was the main story. I wrote about 10 pages of this is what happened to me and how it made me feel and how I got pushed into this, and then also all of the mechanics. This is how I set the murder up. This is how I made it come off. This is why nobody knew that I did it. So then once I had written that, and when we talked it out and we had shared it, then it was so much easier to write it from the other point of view, because I knew what had happened behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Would you ever release that as like an extra? That'd be really interesting.
Yeah.
The director's cut, right?
Might be a bit of a spoiler alert.
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
How difficult or easy is it for you to try and write with your mother's voice?
Well, it's Molly's voice, actually.
Yes, it is Molly's voice. It's been very enjoyable, I would say, and I think it's a writer's dream, because it's like somebody already gave you a sandbox to play in with all the toys and everything there. Instead of creating every character from scratch, there were already all these characters to play with. And also, I grew up reading my mom's writing since she started with children's books when I was a child. So I know her voice very, very well. And then I had read all the Mollys when they came out and then reread them. So I picked that up. I could hear that voice easily.
Yeah, she came in straight away. I mean, I have to say that very first book that we did together, called Wild Irish Rose, I cannot tell you on each page who wrote which piece. I mean, I can never tell, I don't think.
But you say it's Molly's voice, but there is a part of Molly that is absolutely Rhys. That Rhys will never let anyone put her down without a good comeback for them. Absolutely not.
Yeah, no, I have to say there is a slight part of me that likes to be feisty and doesn't like to be walked over.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's working very well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all very much for joining us this afternoon.
well,
Let's
thank
give
you,
our
yeah.
authors a round of applause.
Yeah.
Right.
Um,
And I have a little book to give away that I thought, since we are in the middle of Women's History Month, is called Propaganda Girls, The Secret War of the Women in the OSS. So
right, yeah.
we're finding out more and more about what roles that women played in the war. They weren't, necessarily fighting, but they were doing a lot. John, do we have numbers? Do we give them out? 9. Thank you. Mm. No. That's how many numbers we gave out. Oh well, let's let her let her have it.
I will
Right?
pick.
I know.
I will pick number 9.
9. Wonderful. All right. So anyway, this is an advanced reader's copy. This is not an actual book. So my only requirement is that, well, it's out now, so it's okay. Sometimes when you give these away and they're way far in advance, I have to caution people not to put up spoiler reviews, somewhere, because that actually happened once and enraged the author. Some guy retrieved and then wrote an entire review the next day, giving away the whole plot and the whole bit. I know, it was just tacky, and I thought,
Claire and I are just dealing with that right now with the cover copy for an upcoming book.
really?
The person who wrote it, who's obviously an assistant, gives away most of the plot. We had to go, no, you can't do that.
Let's dial
It's
this
like
back a little
Kirkus
bit.
reviews. If you read a Kirkus review, you hardly ever have to read the book. I know. It's just, it's so interesting. And I mean, if you're talking about a biography or a memoir or real history or something, you could talk all the way through the end of the book. But when you're talking fiction, and particularly crime fiction, you really do have to be careful not to spoil the book for
I
people.
don't know about you, but I hate it if I pick up a book and I look and it says, so-and-so is an annoying person, but when she's found dead, you think, I don't want to know who dies.
Not right away. No, for sure. Anyway, thank you all very much for coming. Rhys and Claire can stay here if you would like to. We don't want to make Claire have to get down again on her bad ankle to get your book signed or just visit with him or take a photo. Please do. Thanks a lot.